You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. I'm back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for a Monday Matters. Jen, I'm laughing out loud because I have said for 10 years now, inspiring, imaginative, innovative ideas for school leaders. And recently I actually reached out to a colleague I've been trying to think about how to rebrand or think about a logo around Principal Matters. And so I haven't even told you this yet. So I'm telling you and listeners at the same time. So that colleague referred me to a graphic designer that they work with. And so I've been working with her now for about a month. And she's been putting together some logo ideas just for something that could kind of capture that whole idea of inspiring, innovative, and imaginative. So we'll be upgrading our website and updating the website. So listeners, if you haven't visited williamdparker.com in a while, it may not be by the time this goes live, it may be in the fall, but we're going to be sharing that out. So it's funny, Jen, because I've said those words for so long, and now we're trying to come up with something that can capture that image as well. All right, I want to talk for just a minute about, in my new book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? I have a chapter I call Life Liturgies. And before I jump into the nitty gritties of what I mean by that, I just want to start with a story. So this morning I was sitting on my back porch. It's summer, and I was just enjoying the sounds of robins in the trees and the flowers in the flower beds and the blue sky behind the billowing clouds in the distance, and my morning cup of coffee, and just being quiet and present. And then I pull out my phone and I start checking social media, and frankly, I just got so overwhelmed with all the updates and what's going on in people's lives, and then feeling that kind of that, I don't know if you ever feel this, Jen, that professional pressure of, I'm not doing those things. And so I just turned it off. Right. And I just stopped for a minute and I went, wow, what a difference between that moment of just being present and then that moment of playing the comparison game. And I wanted to begin there because I think sometimes we don't recognize that the habits, the processes, the routines, the environment, those, for lack of a better word, I like to call those the liturgies of life. You know, almost in every epic of history, people have either had cultural or religious or societal or familial practices that they do that kind of define who they are and when they've lived and what they believe. But I'm curious how often we take a step back from ourselves and just ask, what are those common practices that we are engaging in that are actually forming us, making us, influencing what we think, influencing what we believe, influencing how we speak, influencing how we are present when we're with other people. And I know I'm saying this to listeners who spend a lot of their time managing craziness. And so have you and me. And I also know I'm in a chapter in my life now where, as a consultant and a father of adulting kids, I'm not quite as involved in managing craziness as I used to be. But having said that, this morning's back porch wasn't the first time I've had that experience where I've had to contrast what kind of mindset and what kind of day do I want to have, and how are my liturgies affecting that? So I wanted to bring that question to you, Jen, because and you've been so good at teaching me this. Will, what works for you won't always work for someone else. What works for Jen may not work for someone else. But I'm just curious, in your own thoughts and practices, how those routines and rituals, your own liturgies, have affected the way you live and the way you work.
Right. This is such a profound question for people to ask themselves. And I help you with it, but you also help me too. Remember, not too long ago, we were talking about, you were giving me a coaching session, And I said, I don't know that I have anything unique or new to offer. I get on LinkedIn and there's all these people. And you said, Jen, that you're in an echo chamber. You're looking around at everybody who's sort of like you and thinking that they're like you and they're not. And so I think that's true for most school leaders. We compare ourselves. It's that comparison game that's so incredibly counterproductive. We think that we're looking at comparative professionals as a way to inspire or to guide us. But I think it often silences us because we think, well, I'm not that, or I can't be that. And then I loved your opening story. I think we can all connect to that moment where you thought, wait, I'm overwhelmed. This is too much. It reminds me of a dear friend of mine took her 14-year-old to the airport, dropped her off, and she went to a country in South America and did a week of mission work. And she picked her up at 3 a.m. a week later, and she said, "How was it?" And her daughter said to her, "Mom, they made us put away our phones, and it's the happiest I've ever been." And so here's what the learning is. Of course, there's a lot there we could think about with
Yeah.
students and the national conversation about cell phones and all of that. But it's also about taking control of your own mind and recognizing those signs when you're not in a good place and you need to remove yourself. If something isn't working for you or something isn't working for you anymore, then stop doing it. But we don't do that, right? Well, because we look around and we see other people still doing it. And so we think, well, I better get better at this thing that's making me feel lousy. So that connects in a lot of ways to this chapter in your book, but just kind of my insight on it's about, self-knowledge really and self-identification of feelings and thoughts.
I'm so glad you said that. Jen, anybody that's listened to this show long enough has heard me tell this story so many times they're exhausted by it. So I'm not going to repeat the whole story, but early in my administrative career, when I found myself becoming a shell of who I had once been, and those are the words my wife used to describe me, Will, do you realize you've become a shell of who you used to be? That was really a huge wake-up call for me in terms of, okay, how do I continue in this profession without losing myself or my family or the things that I love the most? And and I never have tried to pretend I have had found the silver bullet. But what I have found is that by intentionally reflecting on things like my mindset, my own health, my own nutrition, my own sleep, what environments I surround myself with, my own movements, my relationships, what keeps me inspired. Somehow those things tend to help me regain some focus or regain some. So I just want to throw some questions out to listeners, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by being present either. But I just want to ask you to think about the rituals and the routines of how do you get out of bed each morning and what are the first things that you encounter into your own mind and thinking? What are the small routines that you have to start your day or to step in to transition your day or end your day? What are the ways, what do you have any exit plans for work so that you can exit in a way that leaves work at work as much as possible? What are the choices that you make that intentionally affect how you feel? And these can be really, really practical, like the news you take in every day, the music you choose to listen to, the clothing you like or don't like to wear. The and then what are those habits that you've chosen that help you stay connected to your most important relationships, whether that's focused celebrations, the birthdays, the milestones, the holidays, those intentional touch points that you know you need to have with the people in your life who you love the most. And I don't know, Jen, it sounds weird to even say all that out loud because none of us ever take a class on that when we're getting our degrees. But those are the liturgies of our lives that help us, I think, stay present.
Right. And I want to be clear, none of that is easy. To break old habits or to break out of who you used to be or who you have become when you don't like that person takes an enormous amount of self-reflection and discipline. I've talked on the podcast before about my decision to stop drinking. I realized I had a bit of a problem. And to change that trajectory took me reaching out to communities that could support me. It took changing the triggers to do the things that were damaging to me. So it required changing friends. It required saying no to things I had done for 20 years, happy hour. Yeah, that'd be great. And I said no. And so that's exceedingly difficult to do, to identify who you don't want to be and say no to that. And so, you mentioned nutrition, you mentioned what you think about, what you take in. So much of that is habit. And there's fear when you abandon a habit because you don't know what will take place of that habit. So just for listeners, because it sounds simple does not mean it's easy. It takes a lot of work. And I think I want our listeners to know that we're not just sitting here preaching about making difficult decisions. It can be a lot of hard work to become who you want to be.
So let me wrap up this conversation about liturgies with something that's not in the book. This is just something that recently happened, Jen, but I don't know, a few weeks, probably by the time this recording comes out, it'll be about a month ago. But recently, my son, Jack, and I took our kayaks up to a local lake, and we were paddling around an island. We'd packed a lunch, and so we swam for a little bit and put the boats up on the shore, and then we climbed up this rocky crag, and we set up on this little cliff, and we're just looking over the lake. And those moments where you're just like, this is a dream.
This is it.
This is it. And so I just said to Jack, hey, you want to try something I used to do with my students when I was an English teacher? And Jack's pretty cool because he's like, I'm game. And I was like, tell me what you see around you right now. And he started describing, the beautiful shimmering light coming across the millions of waves that were out there. And then I was like, okay, what do you hear? And he was like, describing the lapping of the water on the boulders below us. And, what do you feel? The wind whipping in his wet hair, or the smells of the faint sense of fish, from some unknown place. And the ants crawling in the rocks, below our feet. And I'm just saying that because if I want to leave listeners with something practical to think about, and sometimes being present is just can simply be as intentional as just stopping for a moment and asking, what do you see around you? What sounds do you hear? What taste do you have? What are you feeling or touching? What thoughts are filling your mind? And what may you not be aware of that suddenly you're aware of? Because Jen, at the end of the day, I think that, and let me just say this directly to listeners, whatever you're stepping into, and hopefully because it's summer, you're taking a little bit of a change of pace. But I just want to encourage you to resist the temptation to allow the busyness of what's next to distract you from the beauty of what is right now. And most of all, if you can take the time to notice the people with you along the way, and the power of being present is most beautifully realized when we can fully see their faces and hear their voices and experience their presence, then I think we've found some pretty good liturgies of life. So I think I'll wrap it up there, Jen.
Beautiful. Thank you for that.
All right, friends. If you would like to stay connected to Jen or me, you can always find us at our website. Jen, how can they stay connected with you?
Mine's easy. It's jenschwanke.com.
And you can find me and all my resources at williamdparker.com. Until next time, thanks for doing what matters, and we hope you have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.